how do you want to be different after these 12 weeks? And for anyone who says, oh, I want to improve my communication skills, I'm like, well, then I'm going to be calling on you all the time, because this is your opportunity to actually practice that and get feedback and coaching.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Aligning Life and Wealth interview series, where we're making money mean more by aligning it with aspects of life that matter most. We interview what I like to call our life experts, from education to health and wellness to travel and leisure. Their services have a great impact on the lives of many. I'm Michael Conway, President and CEO of Conway Wealth. And today I'm excited to introduce to you Matt Plummer, founder and CEO of Zarvana. Okay, good morning, Matt. Welcome, and thank you for visiting with us today. It's good to see you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Excited to have a conversation today.
Yes, excellent. All right. We will jump in. If you could tell us, let's set the table for the audience. Tell us about your company, Zarvana, what you do, and how you make a difference.
Absolutely. So Zarvana provides critical thinking training to professionals, often information workers or knowledge workers or folks in management. And really the problem that we seek to solve is that, a lot of people learn how to execute on a set of tasks when they're told exactly what to do. But really, especially in the age of AI, what's necessary is for people to be able to do critical thinking, to make decisions, make recommendations, to come up with the strategy and operate like a kind of independent leader. And so we try to help people make that jump. And that involves a number of other related skills like time management, because that's part of, how you execute communications. I like to say that good communication flows from good thinking. And so critical thinking is kind of the basis of that. And what we're trying to do is both help individuals make that jump, but also for those who are in leadership. And this was kind of where it started for me. The challenge is, how do I take what I've developed over years of experience and transfer that to someone else so that they can think at the level that I'm thinking, so that I can spend my time on other things and allow them to operate more independently. And so that's really the focus of our training programs and our coaching.
Gotcha. I just had a thought as you're going through that. You talk about AI, and I know even for all of our team members, the world is coming at us so quick. It's just so fast between AI and all social media and all these things happening. How does that have an impact on your coaching?
Well, AI, it can be a really powerful tool, but it also, and some research has come out on this, it can also undermine our critical thinking, because if we don't kind of understand the appropriate relationship that we should have to AI, then we will rely on it too much and will basically allow our critical thinking muscles to atrophy because we won't be using them. And so what we want to do is we want to be really good at structuring our engagement with AI. That, some people talk about the prompts, right, that you're entering into AI, and setting up a framework and a structure. And that's what we teach in our critical thinking program. It's how do you take any decision and turn it into a structured, repeatable process? And it's the same thing when you're going to work with AI. It's how do you give AI the structure, the framework that you want it to operate in and think in. And then once it provides an output, how do you take that as not the final product, but as something that then is a starting foundation for you to build on? And so we can use it as a really powerful tool, but we also need to be really active on the front end and the back end.
So let's tease out a little bit on this one. How does your critical thinking training help team members of these different companies make better decisions every day?
Yeah, the focus is, and we define critical thinking as making good decisions. And so the question that we ask when we start a training, for example, is, what if your team could make 10% better decisions this year? What would be the impact of that? And you could imagine that there'd be, revenue or net income, benefits, as well as any impact that you're intending to have on your customers or on society. And so what we offer is a framework for how to think about that. And so we have a framework called the Critical Thinking Roadmap, which explains 4 phases there are to growing in critical thinking. And what we try to do is basically take what a lot of people think as either just something you're born with or you're not. Oh, I'm smart, or maybe I'm not as smart as I'd like to be, or I just kind of intuitively get it. And we take that, what happens subconsciously and intuitively, and we make it explicit. And so there's 4 phases. The first phase is execute, which is how do you translate instructions into action? Second phase is synthesize, which, to your point earlier, how do you take a whole bunch of information and identify what's important and then make sense out of it and generate new insights? Phase 3 is recommend, which is how do you actually make the decision and come up with a robust rationale for that? And then phase 4 is operating kind of at a higher level of critical thinking, which is generate. And that's how do you come up with a truly novel and creative solution when you are, when the situation requires that. So we move people through those phases and teach them practical tools. And, to come back to what I said earlier, how do they translate a decision that they might be making intuitively into a structured, repeatable process that they can do each time and get up the experience curve, and then also that they can transfer to someone else and teach someone else how to do.
So one of the things I always coach to myself is trying to prioritize which task is the most important, right? Because we get bombarded with all these tasks. So how do you help people prioritize as you're getting hit all day? Clients are emailing our people, and talk about that for a minute.
Part of what you want to do is you want to have a system for prioritization. And that comes down to having a single place where everything you have to do lives. And some people decide to separate work and life, which is fine,
Sure.
And I could talk about when it would make sense to separate that and when it might not. But once you have a single place where everything lives, then what you want to think about are what are the criteria or the characteristics that determine something's priority level. And a lot of people, I would say, kind of oversimplify there to just think about the deadline or the due date. And in reality, you want to consider a number of other factors. What you said just before, which is importance or value add to the organization, but also things like what are the dependencies? Because if it has greater dependencies, then you're going to have to prioritize that even if the deadline is further out. And so in the same way that I've talked about a structured, repeatable process for making a decision, that's essentially a decision is what's most important. So you want to you have your list of things to do, and then you have a structured, repeatable process for making those decisions. And, what I would say is ideally you're using some type of task management tool that allows you, whatever your criteria are for prioritizing, that you can enter those into each task so that the tool is doing that work for you. And increasingly, to go back to the AI topic, increasingly you can tell it, here's how I want you to think about how to prioritize my task. And then it can look at those and it can make recommendations on that basis. Gotcha. It can actually do that, that filtering for you.
Gotcha. Okay. So how do you design a training so that skills stick and lead to real behavioral change? Because that's what we're looking for ultimately, right? We don't want a one and done. We're looking to change behaviors.
Yes, exactly. And what I would say is skill development in general, when we think about how do you upskill someone, is always going to be about developing new habits because it's what you do repetitively. And so we will work with an organization however they want to, but what we've tried to do is move organizations and companies away from the traditional training model, which is come in for 4 hours, do kind of a big, long training and then go away and not come back. What we know is that people forget within 3 days. They forget most of that. And then they have
or as they're walking out the door.
Well, yeah, true. So what we do is we use a spaced learning hybrid model. So our typical program is a 12-week program, and it has 2-week cycles. So week 1 of that cycle is online learning. So we give people access to our online learning platform. They go on there, they watch the videos that teach them the actual tools. They take a short quiz to make sure that they understand what was most important. And then they fill out a workbook that requires them to apply what they just were taught to their actual work so that they can understand how to make that translation. So that happens in week 1. They can do it at their own pace. Some people take a long time. Some people will fly through it. And then in week 2, we have a live session where the full group comes together. There's experience sharing. They can ask questions. They get feedback from their peers. They break into small groups. They problem solve together. And so that 2 week cycle repeats itself, usually about 6 times. And that by doing a spaced learning model, it allows you to kind of get reinforcement and get things in bite-sized chunks. So you're not like, oh, I just got overwhelmed with 4 to 8 hours of content. And also, whatever you hear in a training is rarely going to be 100% perfect fit for your specific context. And so what I like to say is take what you were taught here and experiment with it. So that gives them 2 weeks to experiment with it, to figure out how to adapt it to their context, and then come back and ask questions or share. And also then we accelerate the learning of everyone else, because if they hear, oh, well, so-and-so did this and it worked or it didn't work, then I don't try that if it didn't work, right? So it allows the group to have accelerated learning as well.
No, that's interesting, because like anything in life, something with repetition, certainly we learn much better than a one and done. And again, you forget half of it almost instantly. Can you share with our audience a real example of a client or team that saw measurable improvement after working with your folks?
Absolutely. So I'd point out 2 kind of individual examples and then 2 team examples. So one small individual example, executive at kind of an energy company, I'll call it. And they went through some of the work we do around time management and use of email. And within, I'd say about 2 months after the program, emailed me back and said, look, this executive said he's saving hours per week, probably about 1 to 3 hours per week. And so that's what we're hoping to do, is get you that incremental improvement that compounds because you do it so frequently. So that's kind of more on the time management side. On the critical thinking side, one of the things that we're working with a manager who is looking to become partner in a professional services firm. And the challenge and reason that they hadn't been moved up and promoted into the partner level was that essentially docked for taking too long to respond to kind of significant emails or correspondence. And what we found is that they felt like they had to have kind of all the answers. And so it took them a lot of time to figure out, okay, well, how do I respond to this? And then to draft a response. And so what we did is, similar to what I described earlier, come up with a structured, repeatable process for getting them to a response more quickly that didn't have to be at 100%. And they were able to implement that, respond much more quickly, while still demonstrating the robustness of their thinking. And, within I think 6 to 12 months, they were then promoted into the partner role. And so those are a few, at the individual level. And then we were working with a marketing agency. And what they did is, after they went through the training program, and then they actually took the tools. So in our critical thinking program, for example, we go through 54 different tools, and they took a handful of those and they actually adapted and then institutionalized them into their corporate practices. And they were using them. So when you came into that company, they had incorporated, taken the templates, adapted them to their own, context and branding and everything, and then use them there to both accelerate their work and also to be able to basically onboard people right into it.
That's great. So the first example of saving 1 to 3 hours a week, and then if you think about the potential of doing that with all of your team members and what that means to the bottom line of a company, and what's the most important things for us is to have raving fan clients, right? So we want to get back to people. I always feel this tension, right? Like if someone sends us an email, I would love it if the team, even if they don't have all of the answers, respond. Let the person know we've got you. We're on it, right? And so that's something that's critical for me. All right, let's see here. On my list of questions, how do you tailor your training programs to fit different industries or company cultures? You've mentioned energy and marketing. So it sounds like you're in a number of different fields. So let's unpack that a bit.
And we do financial services quite a bit, as well as professional services. And then we have some, kind of all across the board. We basically do is we take these same tools and frameworks, which are applicable across the board. But then the key is, how do you translate it into their context? And so when, for example, we're teaching what I call the HAY framework, which is hypothesis, assertions, evidence, which is a way to develop a robust recommendation that you can make a decision on the basis of. So in
Sure.
that case, we'll take an actual example from their context, either by, reviewing their website or surveying them in advance or talking to their leadership so that we know the exact challenges that they're wrestling with and the questions that they have to answer. In fact, in our
Okay.
critical thinking program, we ask them, what are the key decisions you have to make? We call them high impact decisions. And then we'll take those and we'll actually apply the tools in the context of working through those decisions. And so that's kind of a key way that we adapt it. So it's not like some academic theory that's out here, but it's actually applied in the context of the decisions that they're making. And then I would say in terms of company culture, what we say is basically treat this as an experiment. And so start with this, but recognize that you're going to have to adapt this and mold it into something that fits for your professional lifestyle, your professional practices. And so that is, we don't try to say, here's the answer, do this exactly 100% the way that we've, explained it in the program, but use that as a starting point that you can then adapt within the unique context.
Yeah, that's great. So, and this is interesting for me when I think about working with team members, but what role does feedback play in helping participants improve their critical thinking skills? Because do some people get a little prickly with feedback? How does that work?
Feedback is absolutely critical, in part because what we're trying to do is change habits. And what that means is that, if I say one of the tools we teach is answer first communication, which is the idea that when you first start sharing, you should share the most important answer or insight that your audience is looking for. And most people, their natural way of communicating is process first. So I'll tell you everything I did to get to the answer, and then I'll tell you the answer. And meanwhile, the audience is like, why are you telling me all this? Right? They want the answer.
Right.
And so we're trying to, I call it the flip-flop challenge. So we try to get people to communicate answer first. The challenge is that they have a habit, which might be 10 years, it might be 20 years of communicating process first. And so if I say, okay, now go communicate answer first, and they are naturally going to regress back into their habit, which is process first, unless there's someone who's giving them feedback on that. And so what we try to do is encourage one of peer feedback and peer accountability. In fact, at the end of our programs, we encourage them, obviously we can't require them, but we encourage them to find one other person who's participated in that training and then meet for a half hour every 2 weeks to share what am I working on? What's the experiment I'm running? How did it go? And then what am I going to do the next 2 weeks? And that will allow them to have some of that accountability. But then we also, particularly when we're teaching managers, we say, you have to stop them at the point of the negative behavior or the counterproductive behavior. So in the case of the answer first situation, what I would do, and when I was managing teams at a consulting firm and first kind of teaching people this, was they would start communicating process first. And I'd say, stop, hold on. Okay, now try answer first. Because if you allow that behavior to continue, it just reinforces that negative practice. And so we try to teach that there's a huge value for critical feedback or constructive feedback, because that is what will allow you to grow, and not to take it personally, but to take it as an opportunity to grow, and then create an environment in our trainings where people don't feel like it's an evaluative performance, but that it's just a space to experiment and grow. And so I always tell people, we ask them at the beginning, how do you want to be different after these 12 weeks? And for anyone who says, oh, I want to improve my communication skills, I'm like, well, then I'm going to be calling on you all the time, because this is your opportunity to actually practice that and get feedback and coaching.
So that as you go through this, I'm thinking of the example I always use. People are saying, "Oh, the process," without giving the answer. They're giving the answer at the end, and they're telling. So it's somebody asks you what time it is, and you start telling them how the watch is made. And then you tell them what time, like is how to prioritize those things. And okay, let's see. So how do you incorporate technology or digital tools in the learning programs? How do you incorporate that?
So we do in our like primary model, which is the spaced learning model, we do a flipped classroom, basically, if you think in the education context. So traditional
Okay.
training is you come, whether in person or online, and you listen to me offer tools and training, the training content. What we think is that it's much better to use live time for practice, feedback, coaching, and planning of how are we going to incorporate this as a team. So what we say is we put all the content and the training online, and you review that on your own time at your own pace. And then when you come into a live session, we that's about practicing. And so we share in terms of technology. We're using an online learning platform for people to take assessments, to take quizzes, to watch the video content, and we also kind of, when we are thinking about adapting the content to the individual companies, what we do is we'll take our frameworks and then we'll take the companies and we'll put them into AI, for example, and we'll say, give us a set of real decisions that they're likely to be making and then apply it there. And so we're able to adapt our content super quickly to any company using these AI tools. And obviously that, like I said at the beginning, we have to then go in and make sure that that's accurate, but it allows us to take a field. For example, we were working with an investment, an asset management group. And so we took some of our tools, one of them being, how do you make sense of a lot of information quickly? Well, you create a mind map. And so we said, when you're looking at projecting the outlook, financial outlook for a particular portfolio. And so we used AI to create a mind map example in their context, something that they would actually have to do. And it was funny because, so I asked the group, create a mind map of this. So they worked on it for maybe 10, 15 minutes and then shared the results. And then I shared what AI had created with some of, our input and massaging. And they're like, wow, that's actually really good. That's better than what we came up with. And so in that way, we're able to really immerse quickly ourselves into their day-to-day and have the tools, reflect kind of decisions and content that they're working on.
Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. Talk to us about some common challenges teams face when trying to adopt this new thinking, right? I'm sure there's roadblocks. It's not all an easy path forward. So what's that look like?
One of the things we do at the end of the training is we have people develop a 6-month development plan where they pick 1 to 2 skills per month to focus on. And then what we say is, okay, if you were to fail to accomplish your development plan, what would be the primary reason that you would fail? And the most common response to that is time. They say, I don't have time to improve my critical thinking. And some will say, I don't even have time to do critical thinking. I'm just trying to get the work done.
Isn't that ironic, though?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, what we say is you think that doing more, going through this and doing more robust critical thinking will take you more time. But what we say is actually it should be the opposite, because what we're trying to do is take the question of how do I think out of it. So when you encounter a problem or you have a data set and you're trying to make sense of it, or you're evaluating options. Right now, most people are just kind of feeling their way through that and doing something out of habit, but they don't really know how they're doing it. And if it presents a new circumstance, they're kind of trying to figure that out. So what we say is, if you have already figured out how to address each of these situations, then you don't have to think about the how, you just think about the content of it. And so it should be actually much faster and more efficient. So we try to push back on that notion, but that certainly is one that people do bring up is
sure.
And then I would say that the other piece historically has been critical thinking just feels too abstract. It's like, what is it? How do you grow in it? And so that's what, all that we've done around the roadmap, and each phase in the roadmap has 5 milestones. There's an assessment that you can take that has 48 questions, across that. So we've tried to take something that feels really abstract and they're like, I don't really know what critical thinking is. I don't know how to grow in it, and make it very concrete and practical.
Okay, that's fantastic. And as so we're rounding the bend here, Matt. Let's close with this one. How do you measure the long-term impact of your training on team performance? So that is the ultimate measure, right? So how does it work, and how do you do that?
Yeah, this is a really hard one, and one we've thought about a lot. I mean, we'd love to be able to say, oh, yes, we have this specific measure, and in 5 years we go back. The challenge primarily is in attribution of cause, right? So if for example, we help a team become better critical thinkers, there's probably a set of 5 to 10 other factors that influence their thinking. So if they then make better decisions, which then translate into better business performance, it's hard to say, well, it was the training that did that versus, other forces, or what portion of it was the training. But what we look at is in an ideal scenario, teams, and often it's the managers who can feel this on a daily basis, because managers and leaders, they recognize, how much am I having to do the thinking for my teams versus how much are they rising to the challenge and taking that on? And so when managers, for example, we're working with a big telecom company in Europe, and they had all their managers in this one division, probably about 20, 30 managers go through the program, the critical thinking program. And then they said, okay, we're going to spend a year training our 200 people in our department on this. And so then they just kind of added a new group for this year. And so what we're looking at is, do the managers see value in it? And are they getting a benefit from it? And if they do, the biggest indicator to us, because we don't have access to their business outcomes necessarily, is, sure, are they coming back and putting more people into it? And so another company that does manufactures motors and a wide range of kind of diesel related products. They had their original team go through it 4 years ago now. And then every time they have a new cohort that starts with that team, they're sending them through it. And so that's an indication to us of, okay, the leadership in there is experiencing a value from their teams going through this that is tangible to them. And so they're ensuring that future folks go through it as well. So it's not as perfect as an answer as I would like, but that's basically our kind of key indicator is, do they continue to push their new team members through it as an indication that it's benefiting them?
Yeah, that's great. And, when I was raising my kids, I always told them happiness is based on making wise choices. And that's what you and your company at Zarvana do, helping employees and team members make wise choices with critical thinking. So this has been great. So thank you for visiting with us today. It was good to see you, and good to catch up.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on, and appreciate being part of your network and what you're doing to, help people both thrive in work, but also in life outside of work.
Yeah, appreciate that, Matt. Thank you.